Hello, flosstube and cross-stitch enthusiasts and anyone else who stumbles across this. Welcome. I am AM Dreamingstitcher, and I am here to bring you an update on my recent cross-stitching progress. I will let you know when I'm done talking about cross-stitch because I think most of this video is actually going to end up being about my tentative forays into the world, the broader world, I should say, of embroidery. And it's not that embroidery and cross-stitch are not related. Cross-stitch is, in fact, one subset of embroidery. And a lot of the stitching that we do in our cross-stitching may end up, in some cases, looking rather like this. This is a book I've had for some time of embroidery stitches. And if you take a look at it, does that not look rather like some chatelaines and band samplers and other cross-stitched pieces that actually incorporate what we tend to call specialty stitches? So embroidery and cross-stitch are certainly related to one another. In fact, this particular book, which says it has 101 embroidery stitches, offers every stitch in two versions: surface stitches done on plain weave fabrics and even weave stitches, which are exactly the same 101 stitches, only shown on even weave, this kind of fabrics that we use for cross stitch. And every stitch described in the book has both a, plain weave version and an even weave version. So embroidery and cross stitch are a lot alike. I will tell you when I'm done talking about the cross stitch, but if you think you want to stick around, I'm mostly going to talk about why I'm interested in learning more about embroidery and what I have discovered in the world of starter kits and beginner kits, especially all these ones that are out there from so many different companies that are coming out of China and are available. I've gotten mine in places like Amazon and Walmart and Hobby Lobby. And if you have ever had any curiosity about those, stick around and I'll have a bit to show and say on them. But let's begin with the cross stitch, because if you clicked on this because of flosstube in the title, that's what you're here for. I have been working since my last video on just one piece. It's my, I should say, just one cross stitch piece. It is my White Rabbit from Alice's Adventures in Wonderland as charted up by Oriental Originals. I think I've said before, I don't actually know how to pronounce that. So a video I saw recently made me think that this might actually be something like Orenco, which has its accent obviously in a different place than Orenco. Orenco? I don't know. It's like Vervaco. Maybe that's Vervico. I don't know. I don't know how to pronounce that particular company's name either. But whoever these folks are, this is their White Rabbit. They recommended doing him on 14 count Aida, so that's what I did. And he's being done with 2 strands of floss over each square. And what I received was not the 48 color original pattern that I thought I was going to get, but their 30 color simplified pattern. When I last visited you, I had progressed about 50% of the way down the rabbit, and to help guide me as to how far I had gone, I had actually stopped the stitching of the blue border on this side at the 75% mark, a little below his tabard, and the blue stitching on this side at the 50% mark, right around the belt, the red kind of belt line of his tabard, and the upper half of that scroll. That was 50%. So I could see where I was. When I visited you, everything up to 50% was done, plus most of the tabard, which as you can see is well below the 50% line. So how far did I get? My goal has been to stitch for 3 hours a day, at least my goal for the last several months, in order to see if I can estimate accurately how much time a given piece will take. And so I thought that stitching that way with April and May, I could finish the rabbit. When I don't make my 3-hour goal, I kind of carry the time forward to the next day. And I didn't say as much, I don't think, but the last time I came to you, I was about 5 hours behind for that month. as of today on the rabbit, in the 24 days since I last saw you, I am now 38 hours behind. That's more than 12 days. More than half of the days. My goal was not getting met. So the rabbit is not done. He still could get done before the end of May, theoretically. It's only the 16th today. That's only halfway. But I think he would have been done now if I had met my goal. Unfortunately, although he has passed the 75% mark, he is not at 100%. I'm showing you this. I'll unscroll him a bit, but I want you to see that I did put in a running stitch on each side where the 75% mark was. So you can see he is below 75%, but he is not at 100. And this down here is where the corner is turned to the border. Below, I think there's a couple of blue lines there, and then there are 8 lines of white. That'll be easy stitching. It'll take time, but no needle changing or anything else. I just need to get there, and I can see that the colors are very washed out today, but it is what it is. I can't ever seem to find a good place to film for you all. I apologize. So let me unscroll him a bit so you can see how the rabbit actually is coming along. Come on, Mr. Rabbit. There we go. There, he was not being cooperative. Alright, so from the top, he's very pixelated. Again, he only has 30 colors, that's why. But there he is. And here again is what he's trying to look like. So, he could be done by the end of May. That's totally up to me and whether I catch up with my stitching. That's the only cross stitching that got done this month. This 3 weeks and a half, I should say. I did have 2 cross stitching purchases. I was hoping to come to you since it's been such a short time and be able to say, I didn't buy anything. But it's me. I can't seem to stop buying no matter what I do. So there are 2 purchases. I can say that I contemplated each of them for quite a while. One of them I think I may have been looking at since before my last video. And the other I had the chart for in my wish list at 123 Stitch for quite a while now. But I didn't want to go to the expense of kitting it up because I knew there was an actual kit available if I kept looking on the secondhand market. And it came up for bidding, and I kind of set myself a top price between what the original retail was and the cost to kit up. And I got beat out on the bidding, not surprisingly. Then I saw it come up again for straight out purchase, no bidding, for I think it was $3.50 or $4 more than my top price. And I thought, oh, come on, are you going to give up on it just for $3.50 or $4? So I went ahead and purchased. That's a story in itself, but it turned out well. So I'm going to pause you for a moment because my throat's feeling a little sore, and as soon as I get myself something to drink, which will be no time at all for you, I'll be back and show you my 2 kits that I bought. So the first one is based on this print. This is a card, a greeting card version of it. The artist is someone named Mary Barker. I think it's Mary Cicely Barker. I'm not sure, but there are a lot of cross-stitch pieces based off of these also. This was her Flower Fairies series. And I haven't really researched it, but I believe that they said this card was from like 1934, 1935. So obviously she was doing her artwork earlier in the 20th century. And the design, I actually purchased this at the same time from another seller so that I can put it out during the holidays. I somehow have a fondness for holly and ivy as symbols of winter. I am not into fairies as a rule, but I like things medieval, and here we have someone who looks maybe like somebody at a medieval king's court, only he's a tiny fairy and he's running around with holly. So that appealed to me, and I bought this to put out during the holidays since one never knows when the stitching will actually get done. The kit itself, where did I set you down? pause is right here. And the colors and things are not at all true to the original print, I think you can tell, but the design essentially is. He's much paler, has blonde hair, not as antique looking, and so on. There are other flower fairy patterns and designs out there that are a little truer in color to the original. I like this one for what it is. I was considering this one for some time before I even knew the prints were out there. I didn't know how little it correlated to the original until I saw that print, but I liked this before ever seeing the original. And so I finally gave in and bought it. And it was an open kit, but I believe it's complete. And so I'm happy with that, and it'll go in my stash of all the other things that need to be stitched that may never get stitched, which is why, since I like the design, I got the card. So that I can put that out and enjoy it until I get the stitching done. The second kit, the one that I bid on, that I had seen a chart for, and which you can get the chart for, the chart is definitely available, is from the Jan Lynn Platinum Collection. It's from Donna Cooler Design Studio. That's why the chart's available now, since they seem to be putting out so many of their old designs that way. And please excuse the wrinkles and the glare because I had to open this package, which I'll explain in a moment. But this is Oriental Sampler from Jan Lynn. And the part I especially like is this band with the mountains and the ships. I think that's gorgeous. I considered getting the chart just for that. But the whole design really is pretty, and I think I would like it stitched up. So that's why I was looking for the kit, and not just purchasing the chart and doing that single section. So, as I said, it was only a little bit more than, yes, I've opened it, than the one that I missed out on the bidding on. And the seller was a very nice person who uses their eBay items to support their hobby of thrifting. This is what they told me after I had an issue with this. When it came, I saw that it was, the shrink wrap was torn open at the back. So unlike most of my kits, I went ahead and opened it to inspect the contents, and it turned out that it was missing an entire card of floss. It was supposed to have 3 hanks and 2 pre-sorted cards, a card A and a card B. There was no card B. The good news is that the floss list makes it appear that Jan Lynn is using DMC colors and numbers, or at least numbers and names that seem to correspond to the DMC colors. So I will be able to replace the missing floss. I have already put in an order with 123 Stitch to do that, but I did contact the seller and let her know what that, I don't know if it's her, but let the seller know what it was going to cost me. And they not only refunded that, they went above and beyond. So they were a wonderful seller. I've got my kit, and I'll be able to get my floss. And those were my cross-stitch purchases for the month. Yay, only 2. And the floss that is now coming. Coming along with the floss are some embroidery needles. So now we segue to what will probably be the bulk of this video, which is what's going on with me in embroidery. As I said, I will try to give you an idea why I am suddenly pursuing this, and also try to show you some of what you might encounter if you decide to take up embroidery at this point, especially if you begin with some of the starter kits that are on the market. So I've been interested in embroidery for a while, dating back probably to when I was a kid and looking through stitchery catalogs with my sister, and we would always look to see which designs we liked most, and the ones that seemed nicest to us were almost always crewel embroidery. It's a way of painting with thread, and by that I mean, here's a couple of books I've had, probably since they were published 20 years ago, or close to. Finest Flowers in Embroidery. This lady, Trish Bird, has a lot of books in a technique that she refers to, and I don't know if that's general in the embroidery community or not, but it probably is, as needle painting. So this kind of surface stitching can be made to look like painting with thread, really more so than, if cross stitch is paint by number with thread. Embroidery is painting with thread. And here's another one I've had a long time, of birds. Helen Stevens embroidered birds. I am nowhere near being able to do that kind of embroidery. I will be lucky if I can do things more along the lines of this. This is a book I got within, I think, probably 2019, so within the last couple of years. Notice that's more like, as they call it, doodle stitching. Doodles with embroidery, not painting with embroidery. That's about at the level I'm at right now. Why do I want to do it? Because so often when browsing or shopping for cross stitch, I'll see a design that really catches my eye, and I look at it, click on it or look more closely at the catalog entry, and I see that it says it's embroidery. By the way, crewel is a subset of embroidery, which technically is done with wool. And here's another book I've had a long time. That's crewel embroidery. I'm really interested in all of it. The painting, the crewel, the doodling, it doesn't matter. Here's another couple of other books that I got within the past few years, unlike the others that were much older. Teeny Tiny Menagerie, little animals with embroidery. Simple and Charming Embroidery Motifs. I have a lot more books than this, by the way. This is just an idea. And flowers. I like florals, and this is a whole book of floral embroidery. But those are more recent acquisitions, within the last few years. As I've been accumulating cross stitch over the years, I actually have ended up with less than a dozen embroidery kits. And I want to learn to embroider so I can do those kits. They called to me, they appealed to me. I've resisted most because I knew I couldn't stitch them, but I did eventually succumb and get certain of these. So what kind of things am I talking about? Well, one of them I got when visiting my sister in Tennessee. This obviously is crewel. It's even done with wool, Jacobean style. Jacobean? Another one of those words I can't pronounce. I worked with a wonderful lady whose name was Jacoby, so I always think of it as Jacobean, but they were called Jacobites, so it's probably Jacobean. I'm sure my English flosstube viewers, if any, would know. But that I've had. When did I visit my sister? Well, she's been in her current state for close to 20 years, I think. So it had to have been a long time ago that I got that. I got this at the Great Hobby Lobby clearance of about 3 years ago, whenever that was. And it's black work, and black work is not that difficult, but I want to do this well. So I want to learn embroidery to do that well. I got this at a Hirschner's clearance. And just to give you an idea, most embroidery of this sort, they put a design like this on fabric, and you've got to make that turn into this. So I need to learn how to embroider to do that. I got this a few years ago. I might even have shown it to you, because my grandmother stitched exactly this piece in the 1970s, and I feel like stitching it would just help connect me with her. By the way, she was in her 80s then and had a good 20 years to go before we lost her. And then designs like this, there are a lot of them out there. Little birds and flowers. I've accumulated those and would like to make them. But there are others. The real reason that I'm getting things like starter kits, let me find this one, is because of things like this, which completely intimidate me. Again, you have a design on fabric with some open areas that you're supposed to make turn into this. And satin stitch and long and short stitch and things like that are my bane. I need to work with them and with all the stitches. So this rabbit is not going to happen unless I practice my embroidery skills. Now I have a choice at this point. I don't have to embroider. I could stick with cross stitching. Just because I bought these doesn't mean I'm married to them. But because I have hit retirement, it's time to decide, what do I really want to do? I think most of us have certain things we sort of always are attracted to, like I'd like to do that someday. And we may even accumulate a lot of stuff like I have. They tend to refer to that as one type of aspirational buying. Another type is when you're like trying to live up to a certain lifestyle and look like you're more than you are, that kind of aspiration. That's not what I mean. This is more like, who is the person you want to be? Do you want to be a world traveler? So you buy all these guidebooks and things and never travel. That's not a good thing. So I have accumulated different kinds of things because of my aspirations. Now that I'm retired, am I actually going to pursue them or not? Well, embroidery is kind of the first test of that. What have I done so far other than accumulate a bunch of kits? I have done a minimal amount of embroidery, starting with what seemed a safe bet, Aunt Martha's embroidery transfers. I'm sure you've all seen these. My most recently purchased ones are these three, which actually had some scary information on them that sort of put a hitch in my plans. But the one that I've done a little bit of actual stitching with was this one that seemed to be mostly cross-stitch, and then I would have a chance to practice other stitches on the other portions of the design. Some of the transfers I got these at Walmart long ago, were just embroidery things that I thought were kind of cute, or maybe they had some cross-stitching in them, or they could have been pure embroidery. But I need to learn how to do what it takes to bring those to life and to do something with them. And so the only one I've actually done anything with was that first one with the fruits, and I've done 3 not very well rendered tea towels. The first one I did, by the way, I think I mentioned in a previous video, I've been buying cheap embroidery floss to practice my embroidery with so that I don't use my good DMC on it. And that has limited things like the color selection that I can use on these, because the cheap stuff, these were all done with designs for the needle, just doesn't come in a very wide array of colors. So this orange is mostly obviously cross-stitched, but I did get a chance to learn and practice stem stitching and chain stitching on this one. Sometime later, much later, I started this one with the strawberries and set it aside, which was a bad idea because the stamping faded, and when I came back to this, I could barely see at all what I was trying to stitch, which is why a lot of this is actually crooked and not the way it's supposed to be. But more stem stitching on the leaves, chain stitching on the outer parts of the strawberries, and a tiny bit of satin stitching on the stems. And then most recently, in April, I think, or the end of April, or beginning of May, I did the pears. And again, I'm very disappointed that the color selection is not better with these flosses, but I still probably could have done better with the lighter shade of green or something. But cross stitches, stem stitches, and satin stitch, and that satin stitch I really need practice. That's not at all the shape that stem at the top is supposed to have, but that's where my stitches took me, so I need to practice with them. How does one learn embroidery? How does one get from, okay, I have a book and I put some stitches onto a towel, to actually being able to follow a design that someone else has created and make it happen? Well, here was the first thing I tried. Again, from a Hobby Lobby clearance event, I got this so cute embroidery kit with 12 designs. They will look, as I show them to you, a lot more like the doodle stitching book than, say, the crewel embroidery book. But this is what 6 of the designs look like. And here are the other 6. And they actually teach you 12 different stitches, which is more than I've shown you on my towels so far, that's for sure. And the problem is that particular starter kit, even though it's simple, kind of for kids, is it did not come with enough fabric. It came with these embroidery transfers of the designs and only 2 pieces of fabric that are the same size as these transfer sheets. So unless you wanted to put all 4 on a piece of fabric, in which case you'd still only get 8 of your designs onto fabric. You're going to have to go out and get fabric of your own. And even if you put all 4 on, they're not all in the same orientation or anything. That's not going to work. So I went out some time ago, again, always with the idea going forward that someday I would learn to embroider. So I stocked up all this aspirational buying of someday I'll do that thing, and got some fabric that I thought might work. Mostly I got pieces of off-white muslin, but I got some of this poly cotton in white and blue and green, I think. Pale blue and green. And I thought maybe since they didn't give me enough white fabric with that kit, I can transfer my designs onto little squares of this fabric. And you can see my transfers weren't perfect, but as long as they don't fade, we might be alright. This one came out really crooked because the transfer shifted while I was ironing. But there is a problem here, and this comes back to my frightening news from Aunt Martha. The old Aunt Martha patterns didn't say this, but these newer ones that I got have a warning on them on the back about removing the stamping. You may know with a lot of stamped cross stitch, once you wash it or soak it, the colors come out and leave just your stitching. I thought that was the case with iron-on transfers, but not always. Remove stamping. We do not, that's in capital letters, we do not guarantee removal of stamping. Always do a test design before beginning project to see if it will wash out of your fabric. Use cold water and dry on a cool setting. Try hand washing with a grease cutting dish soap, removable from 100% cotton fabric. Poly cotton or synthetic blends are permanent. Poly cotton. Me trying to transfer from sheets that have more than one design on them. Me ending up with stamping that has other designs showing through, thinking that it would wash off. It won't wash off. The good news is, in some cases at least, once you put it in a hoop, you can maybe set it up in a way that the extra stamping doesn't show, but not always. I did stitch one of these. I don't think they came with enough floss. They certainly didn't give you enough fabric. They gave you a nice little book with directions, but this is what I got on my poly cotton fabric. This is a smaller hoop. This is a 5-inch hoop, and you can see I need a lot of practice. A lot of practice. My double rows of stem stitching, you can see little parts where they didn't lay well. I did in one of my embroidery books read someone saying that the embroiderer has to learn to spend as many hours pulling out as putting in stitches. So if I was not pulling out nearly enough, obviously, partly because this fabric was really resistant to the needle. Another thing I'm learning is that the needles that come with these may not be entirely suitable, and this fabric I was using is very taut, and it was so hard on my fingers getting the needle to come through at times that I got a couple of boxes of these office supplies, rubber thumb tips, one for the thumb and one for the finger, so that I could grip the needle and pull when I need to, when it was too resistant. I found out pretty quickly I didn't actually need 2 sizes, one for the thumb and one for the finger, because if you have one on either, that gives you enough grip to get that needle through. But my lazy daisies don't look like theirs. This was their apple. Nice and neat and pretty. See how tiny the little lazy daisies are inside the leaves? How straight and neat the back stitching is? How smooth the line of their double row of stem stitching is? Mine is bumpy. My my back stitch isn't even always straight lines. The stitches are all different sizes. My lazy daisies followed the markings exactly, but they look very crowded and sloppy. I need practice. I need to practice. Thus the starter kits. To get me from this to where I want to be, I'm going to need to do a lot of embroidery. So it's not like I'm in love with all those little ones that I just showed you, but they are the opportunity to practice. Same thing with this set, which I just got within the past month or so from Amazon. And it too has several different designs, limiting themselves to just a few different types of stitches. It too is appropriate for beginners, including children. They don't exactly overlap the other set. For example, this set does not attempt to include French knots. They probably recognized that children might be a little too challenged by those. It's hard to explain a French knot on paper, although that's the way I learned them. There's a little bit of satin stitching in here, a few different things. I believe they also have 10 or 12 different stitches that they teach you. And unlike the other kit, this one comes with enough fabric. There are 10 designs. They have 9 pieces of fabric plus the tote bag, so that you can do all 10 of your designs. And a lot of it clearly is things like running stitch. But I need practice with that. I just showed you how terrible I am at it. The more of these little ones I do, the more improvement I should see over time. Or I suppose I could, just keep pulling the stitches out and putting them back in until they're right. But as one of the direction books for these said, your embroidery doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't need to look just like it. If you're not enjoying it, there's no point. The important thing is to take your time and enjoy what you're doing. So pulling things out, probably I wouldn't enjoy too much. Those obviously, even with the variety of stitches they have, aren't quite going to get me to where I need to go. So this is where those kits I mentioned come in, the starter kits from China that are just out there. There are so many. Oh, speaking of kits, one more thing I forgot to show you a few minutes ago. At least I think I forgot. Did I show you these when I was talking about the stitching I want to do? I got these 3 from eBay because my late father, loved ships. Obviously I can't stitch them for him now, but just like stitching the other piece for my grandmother, stitching this would help me feel connected to him. So those little kits deserve to be seen. Now, some of you might hesitate to get these Chinese kits. What you get really seems to vary depending on the seller. And I got some from a whole bunch of different sellers. Some of them take enough pride in their product, or perhaps one could say have enough understanding of marketing to clearly mark what they send you as their product and to make sure that it's neatly packaged and all that kind of thing. Some of them, I got at least one, just sort of throw the kit in an envelope with a hoop. Okay, it really varies. Some of them, so far, for me, only one, have this issue. Beautiful kit, all ready to go, nothing in English. Now, one can overcome that, I guarantee it. There are only 4 different stitches used here, most of which you'd already be familiar with. We have French knots at the bottom, we have back stitching, we have what I think is satin stitching, and we have straight stitch. They do make this actually easy to understand. The number in front of each corresponds to your color card. You get a color card and some needles. By the way, I said I was struggling with the needles on the little apple that I did. I was using pretty small needles because, well, the one that came with the kit I think was smaller than the one I ended up using. But these, that are with this kit at least, bear a strong resemblance to those number 2 size crewel needles, which is huge. I was stitching with like a 7 or a 9 maybe. These are big. So maybe that helps. Another thing I found out about needles, but I think I haven't lost them, hang on, is that this first kit I showed you came with 2 different needles, one of which they explained was a milliner's needle, and I wasn't aware of this. Milliner's needles are supposed to be excellent for French knots and bullion knots. Now, I'm not afraid of doing French knots on cross stitch. I don't know if it's a lot harder on embroidery. I haven't tried it yet. On plain weave fabrics, I should say. But bullion knots, I've seen those, and yeah, you need one of these needles. They don't widen at the top, so you can slip your knot through it when you need to. Anyway, these come with 2 large needles. I don't know what variety they are. And the numbers correspond to what color to use. So how do I figure out the rest of it other than eyesight, knowing that's obviously a French knot? Well, I match the appearance of the symbols to the appearance of the symbols in this bar down there, and I think they match. So I'm just using my eyesight to match what I see to those, so that I know what stitch they're calling for. The only problem here is they don't tell me how many strands. I think it's 3 strands, because a lot of these have a 3 in parentheses, but the French knots, for example, don't have any Arabic numerals at all. I have no idea how many strands. I'll find out when I do it. So if you're hesitating to order, does this look familiar? Does this look like the starter kits online? If you're hesitating ordering them because of that, worst case scenario, I'm sure you could figure this out. It really isn't that difficult to see what stitch they're showing you in the instructions and what stitch is on the fabric. And the fabric, by the way, varies a lot, but in most of the kits I got something like this. I hope you can see that. It's got the background stamped on a piece of fabric. Let's turn that one the right way around. And again, you just need to make yours look like that. You fill them in somehow. And it came with a hoop, bamboo hoop. So one of the differences among these various kits is, what do they come with? Do they or don't they have a hoop? How many projects are in each kit? Because you can get them individually, you can get them in pairs, in sets of 3, in sets of 4, in sets of 5, with different designs. When you order them, sometimes at a place like Amazon, when you click on it, you'll see there's a bunch of different options. Those different options are showing the different sets you can get, and so far every one of my sets that I got matched what they said it was going to be. You're going to see that I've got a lot that look alike, that are florals and things, but this set, for example, is an Embroidery Starter Kit that I got through Amazon, and you can see what kind of designs it would have. And this particular company is proud enough of their product, or wise enough in their marketing, to proudly stamp their name right on the package. And I got each kit in its own little package. For example, this one, you can see the fabric, you can see the floss. The directions are similar to what you saw on the other, except they are in English. Sorry, I bet that's really noisy. So instead of that design where everything was marked out in a script I can't read, these other kits all are more like this. You see a color picture of your finished product. It labels every area of the design with an indication of what you're going to use: long and short stitch, 2 strands, color number 2. Okay, they're really easy to understand. You're going to take this and take your fabric and make them look alike. They also, sometimes larger than others, have stitch diagrams. And there's a variety available. And the difference between them seems to be, what do they include? Do they have a plastic hoop or a bamboo hoop? How many needles do they give you? Do they include other accessories like cutting tools or threaders? Some of them do. So I've gotten all kinds. Here's some with flamingos. They didn't indicate who made this kit. It came with enough hoops for all 3 designs that I bought. No other accessories, no indication of the manufacturer. This one, excuse me, has things like that cute bear. Or there's like a squirrel on the other side in a forest. Some of the more deluxe ones, this was 3 kits, came with 4 hoops and an extra piece of fabric to go with your 4th hoop. Whereas the kits, and it's in a nice little zip bag, and the kits themselves, as are most of the ones I got, are just these flower type designs. And by the way, you will see exactly the same designs being sold by different sellers. So when I was choosing mine, again, I wanted to make you aware of what's out there if you decide you want to get into embroidery starter kits. I tried to find sets that had designs I liked without overlapping each other so that I didn't end up with duplicates, because different sellers sold exactly the same kits. You could even tell they'd come with the same packaging with the numbers on them. This butterfly one, for example, dragonfly, whatever we've got here, was in several different sets by different sellers. But those came in their own nice little bag with enough hoops for all of them and extra fabric. Others come with maybe 1 hoop for 3 kits. This is one that shows their brand name, Picoe. Has 4 nice kits there in it. Comes with 2 hoops for 4 kits. This is an individual one, so they cost kind of more per item individually. But it has a hoop and a cutting tool and a threader. And the hoop is plastic. Some people want plastic, some people want bamboo. This is another one where they're proud of their product. They mark on the outside which ones you're getting. They have their company name Kato on there. They package them up nicely. We get 1 hoop for all these different designs. Another difference between them seems to be the fabric itself. Some are more generous in the cut size of their fabric. Some of the fabric seems a little flimsier, some of it seems a little sturdier. Some of them come with full color printing on the fabric. So just a quick, almost everything I got are these kind of florals where they look like they're growing out of the ground naturally, I guess you could say. But I did at Hobby Lobby, when I stopped by there to look for needles, find out that they had 30% off. I was out of town in a different Hobby Lobby than my local one, and got some Pusilla and Leisure Arts. And I tried to look for a variety of stitches in the ones I was getting, but there is a lot of repetition. This is obviously lazy daisies, satin stitch, stem stitch, French knots. That's common in a lot of these. I'm not getting practice with a whole lot of different stitches, but I looked at the leaves on these and thought, those look different. I don't know what's going on in those leaves. I want to get that kit and learn how to do that stitch. I got this, by the way, from Amazon. It was from Kato, I think. It was cheap. It was about $11. And it comes with things that aren't even pictured there, like straight pins and Aida cloth and little sewing tomato and so on, and hoops, and there's plenty of stuff in there, and 100 skeins of floss for me to practice with. There's a set that's going to involve a lot of satin stitching, 3 different plant designs. Yeah, I got into these kits, and some, like I said, almost every single one of them has been in English. There's another one. They come in all different styles, a lot of florals, but not all. They really, this is what you'll get if you try them out, is these kinds of things. Some of them come with extra cutting tools. You can see that's Picoe again. And it's showing you the 4 designs that I got. I like the ones with birds and branches and things. But this one is going to give me more practice with things like satin stitch and long and short stitch, which I'm really bad at, as opposed to a lot of the kits that, as I said, stick to the simple things like stem stitch, lazy daisies, which I still need to practice with. But these ones that have satin stitching, like these pretty birds, that's the kind I need to work on so that I can transfer those skills to doing the more elaborate embroideries. So you're probably shaking your head by now and saying, oh good Lord, AM, what have you gotten yourself into? You already had 50 years of cross stitching, and now you've bought yourself probably 30 starter kits. Well, for one thing, they take a lot less time than cross stitch. Secondly, I do have a place that I'm going to put them. There's a huge empty wall in this room above my desk, and as I finish these, I know that I am going to fill that wall with stitched up hoops full of embroidery. So it's not like they're going to sit in a box somewhere. Third, there's nothing that says that I can't, cross stitch all day every day. I just, on the side, want to work on and improve my embroidery skills so that someday I will be able to take some of those kits I showed you that started me on this journey and make them. And if I did see an embroidery kit that I absolutely fell in love with, I would have the skill set to do something about it. I do not intend to inflict embroidery on you in any of my other flosstube videos unless I should happen to have a finished piece, and then I will show it after my cross stitch and say, look, here's an embroidery piece I finished. Other than that, I think I've shared about as much as there is to share with cross stitchers about these embroideries, just to show you that you get a whole lot of different stuff from a whole lot of different sellers. The directions are simple but usually very clear as long as they're in English. The products overlap one another in many ways, so read the descriptions carefully and they'll tell you how many hoops it comes with, for example, and whether they include cutting tools. They'll call them scissors, but to my mind those don't really look like scissors. If you have any questions or want to know more about these, I'm sure there's more I didn't drag out there and show you. If you wanted me to show you individually what patterns I got, I doubt if you're that interested, but if you're into embroidery, maybe you want to see, just let me know. Thank you for sitting through this and listening. This is a pretty long video considering how little cross stitching was in it, but I'm sure those who didn't want to listen were wise enough to tune out quite a long time ago. My next video will come probably on the third Sunday of June. Let us hope that the rabbit is actually done by then so that I can move on to a new piece. I'll check this video as usual and see how things like my sound came out. I have a feeling that I may have been crinkling and banging more than I like, but unless it was really awful or unless you can't hear the sound, I probably won't redo it, so apologies for the noises, because if you're watching this, that means they stayed in. And I hope everybody's stitching is going well and that you're all having a good spring heading soon into summer here. Take care, and I'll talk to you next month. Bye.